Hi, you guys. I am Hollywood Koko. I am more than honored to be participating in this film that D. Smith created. And I am lost for words. I just still cannot believe that I'm a part of this. And I want to thank D. Smith so much. And the females, I want you to understand that it's nothing but respect. I don't bash females at all. That's not something I do. I'm willing to teach the females how to keep these dudes. The dudes love how dominant I am because I basically make them do what the want them to do.
In January 2023, a documentary premiered at the Sundance Film Festival that would change everything. Kokomo City was designed to show the world something revolutionary, the authentic, joyful lives of Black transgender women, beyond the statistics and tragedy that usually define their stories in media. The film's director, D. Smith, wanted audiences to see these women as they truly were. Complex, vibrant human beings with dreams, humor, and an unbreakable spirit. One of the film's stars was Rashida Williams, known to the world as Koko. At 35, she radiated what everyone described as pure light. Her smile could transform any room, and her laugh was infectious. Koko wasn't just participating in this groundbreaking documentary. She was living proof of its message. Here was a Black trans woman who refused to be defined by society's limitations, who was actively building a music career and chasing her dreams with unwavering determination. But here's where this story takes a turn that no one could have predicted, and it's the reason we're here today. Just 3 months after Kokomo City premiered to critical acclaim, Koko would become the very statistic the documentary sought to prevent. The film that was meant to humanize Black transgender women and highlight the dangers they face daily would transform into something else entirely, a memorial to one of its own stars. This isn't just another true crime story. This is about a woman who stood up, spoke out, and dared to dream big in a world that often refuses to see people like her as fully human. Koko's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the violence that continues to plague one of America's most vulnerable communities. Rashida Williams was born to be a performer. Those who knew her best remember a woman with an enormous heart and an even bigger personality. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Koko was actively pursuing her music career, with her work even set to be featured on the popular television show, The Chi. She was a beloved figure in Atlanta's LGBTQ+ community, someone people looked up to as a pioneer and inspiration. When D. Smith was casting for Kokomo City, they weren't looking for victims or sob stories. They wanted to capture the authentic experiences of Black trans women, including their realities as sex workers, but through a lens of dignity and humanity. Koko embodied exactly what the director was seeking, someone unafraid to share her truth. Someone whose very existence was an act of resistance. In the documentary, Koko spoke with remarkable clarity about her purpose. She wanted to be the reason there's more opportunities and doors opening for transgender girls. These weren't empty words. This was her mission statement. Every day she lived openly and authentically. She was creating space for others to do the same. The success of Kokomo City at Sundance filled Koko with excitement about what lay ahead. She saw the positive reception as validation that the world was ready to hear stories like hers, that change was possible. The film represented everything she had hoped for, a platform where Black trans women could be seen as complete human beings, not just cautionary tales or victims. This is what makes what happened next so devastating. The documentary that was supposed to protect women like Koko by raising awareness about the violence they face couldn't protect its own star. The film that sought to change hearts and minds about Black transgender women would instead become a painful reminder of how much work still needs to be done. Koko's participation in Kokomo City wasn't just career advancement, it was activism. By sharing her story, by allowing herself to be vulnerable on camera, she was fighting for every transgender woman who came after her. She understood that visibility, while empowering, also carried risks. But she chose courage over safety because she believed in the power of her story to create change. The timing of everything makes this case particularly heartbreaking. Here was a woman on the cusp of breakthrough success, finally seeing her community's stories being told with dignity and respect. finally believing that things might be different for the next generation of transgender women. Before we continue with what happened on that terrible night in April 2023, I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? And what draws you to true crime stories like Koko's? Is it the search for justice, the need to understand what drives people to violence, or something else entirely? Drop your location and thoughts in the comments below, because understanding why we're drawn to these stories helps us understand why they matter. April 18th, 2023 started like most evenings for Koko Didal. The spring weather in Atlanta was pleasant, and she was out and about in southwest Atlanta, living her life just as she always did. At around 11 p.m., she found herself near the Peaks at MLK apartment complex, a typical residential building in the area. What happened next began with something so ordinary, so mundane, that it would be almost impossible to predict the horror that would follow. Koko needed to charge her phone. It's the kind of simple, everyday need that any of us might have: a dead battery, the search for a charger, asking a stranger for help. These small moments of human interaction happen thousands of times every day without incident. The security cameras at the apartment complex captured everything. The footage shows Koko approaching the entrance of the building, where she encountered a man. She asked him if she could use a phone charger. This wasn't unusual. People help each other out with small favors like this all the time. The man appeared willing to assist, and they both entered the complex together. For those few minutes, everything seemed perfectly normal. Two people, strangers helping strangers, the kind of brief interaction that typically ends with a thank you, and both parties going their separate ways. The video shows what appears to be a calm interaction near the pool area of the complex. There's nothing in these early moments that suggests what's coming, but then something changed. The same cameras that captured their initial meeting also recorded Koko leaving the complex alone. She walked out of the building and headed toward the street. The timestamp shows this was only a short time after she'd first arrived, maybe 15 or 20 minutes at most. Whatever had happened inside the complex, their interaction was over, and Koko was departing by herself. That should have been the end of it. A simple favor between strangers, concluded without incident. But it wasn't. The man followed her out. At the intersection near the complex, there was a woman waiting at a bus stop. She was minding her own business, probably checking her phone or watching for her ride, when she became an unwitting witness to what would unfold next. What she saw would haunt her and provide crucial testimony for investigators. The woman watched as Koko and the man who had helped her with the charger began arguing in the street. This wasn't a quiet disagreement. It was heated enough to catch the attention of someone waiting for public transportation. The argument continued as they moved further into the roadway, their voices raised, the tension escalating rapidly. Then came the sound that would shatter the evening calm. 4 gunshots rang out in quick succession. The sound echoed off the nearby buildings, unmistakable and terrifying. The woman at the bus stop instinctively looked toward the source of the noise, and what she saw will stay with her forever. Koko Didal was lying in the road. The shooter didn't stay to check on his victim. He didn't call for help. Instead, he ran from the scene, disappearing into the Atlanta night as quickly as the violence had erupted. Koko was found on a sidewalk near Holmes Shopping Plaza at 2457 MLK Jr. Drive in southwest Atlanta. When paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. Atlanta police confirmed that she was not alert, conscious, or breathing, and pronounced deceased on scene. The gunshot wound had been fatal. The location where this happened makes the crime even more jarring. This wasn't some isolated area or abandoned lot. Holmes Shopping Plaza is a busy commercial area with regular foot traffic, nearby businesses, and people coming and going at all hours. A Wendy's restaurant sat nearby, along with other establishments that draw customers throughout the evening. This was a public space where people should feel safe. What makes this case so disturbing is how quickly everything escalated. We're talking about a timeline of maybe 30 minutes from first contact to murder. Koko went from asking for a simple favor to lying dead in the street in less time than it takes to watch a TV show. The speed of the escalation is almost incomprehensible. The witness at the bus stop, immediately sought help to call 911. But it was too late. Whatever had triggered the argument between Koko and her killer had spiraled into lethal violence with shocking speed. The everyday nature of how this started, a request to borrow a charger, makes it feel like something that could happen to anyone, anywhere. Security cameras outside the nearby Wendy's restaurant captured the actual shooting, providing investigators with crucial visual evidence of the crime. But having the shooting on video doesn't answer the most important question. Why did a simple request for help end in murder? The randomness of it all is perhaps the most unsettling aspect. Koko wasn't targeted because of some ongoing dispute or personal vendetta that investigators could identify. She didn't know her killer beforehand. She simply needed to charge her phone and ask the wrong person for help. In the span of less than an hour, Koko Dadal went from being a vibrant woman going about her evening to becoming the victim of a senseless act of violence. The transition from mundane favor to fatal encounter happened so fast that even with multiple cameras recording the events, it's hard to understand what triggered such extreme escalation. The fact that this happened in such a public space, witnessed by an innocent bystander and captured by multiple security systems, shows just how brazen and sudden this act of violence was. Someone was willing to shoot another human being in the middle of a busy area, with potential witnesses around, over what started as a request for phone charging help. In the immediate aftermath of Koko's murder, Atlanta police found themselves with a crime scene that told only part of the story. They had a victim, they had witnesses, and they had the location where everything went wrong. But they didn't have their shooter. What they did have, however, was something that would prove invaluable in modern criminal investigations: a digital trail. The security system at the Wendy's restaurant had captured more than just the moment of the shooting. The cameras had recorded the gunman's appearance in detail, and what investigators saw would become the key to solving this case. The shooter was wearing a distinctive white hoodie with a specific emblem on it, paired with slides on his feet. This wasn't just any generic clothing. The hoodie had identifying marks that would make it recognizable to anyone who had seen it before. But the investigation didn't stop with just one camera. Atlanta is a city filled with security systems, and investigators began the methodical process of tracking the suspect's movements through multiple camera angles. Each business, each intersection, each parking lot potentially held another piece of the puzzle. Their persistence paid off when they discovered additional video from a nearby Chevron convenience store. This footage showed a man wearing the exact same distinctive white hoodie and slides that the shooter had been wearing. The clothing match was unmistakable. Same hoodie, same emblem, same footwear. But more importantly, this video gave them a clearer view of the suspect's face. The Chevron footage was a goldmine. Unlike the shooting video, which captured the crime, but from a distance, this convenience store video showed the suspect up close and in good lighting. Investigators could see his facial features, his build, his mannerisms. This was the kind of clear visual evidence that could lead to identification and arrest. Recognizing the power of public assistance in solving crimes, Atlanta police made a strategic decision. They released still frames from the Chevron video to local news outlets, asking for the community's help in identifying the person of interest. The images showed the suspect clearly, a young man in that distinctive white hoodie captured by the store's cameras. These weren't grainy, unclear photos that left room for doubt. The quality was good enough that anyone who knew this person would likely recognize him. The police were essentially putting up a digital wanted poster, hoping that someone in the Atlanta area would see the images and provide the tip that would lead to an arrest. What happened next was completely unexpected and would change the entire trajectory of the investigation. On April 26, 2023, just days after the murder and shortly after the images were released to the media, the person in those photos saw himself on the news. The young man looking back at him from news broadcasts and social media posts was unmistakably himself. There was no denying it, no hoping that the resemblance was coincidental. His name was Jermarcus Jernigan, and he was just 17 years old. Rather than trying to run or hide, Jernigan made a decision that stunned investigators. He walked into the Zone 1 precinct and turned himself in. This wasn't a dramatic arrest after a manhunt. There were no high-speed chases or tactical teams kicking down doors. Instead, a teenager simply showed up at a police station and identified himself as the person they were looking for. The voluntary surrender was remarkable for several reasons. First, it demonstrated the power of modern technology and public engagement in solving crimes. The combination of multiple camera systems and community involvement had made it impossible for the suspect to remain anonymous. Second, it showed that even in cases of violent crime, suspects sometimes choose cooperation over confrontation. Jernigan's age added another layer of complexity to the case. At 17, he was still technically a minor, but under Georgia law, he would be charged as an adult for this crime. The young man who walked into that police station was about to face the full weight of the adult criminal justice system. The speed of this investigation was truly remarkable. From murder to arrest, the entire process took just 8 days. In a world where some cases go unsolved for years or even decades, this rapid resolution stood out. The combination of clear video evidence, distinctive clothing, and the suspect's decision to surrender had compressed what could have been a lengthy investigation into just over a week. Jernigan was transported to the Fulton County Jail without incident. The charges against him were serious: murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Despite his youth, the gravity of the accusations meant he would be processed through the adult court system. The investigation that led to this arrest showcased how modern technology has transformed law enforcement. Multiple camera systems working together, high-quality digital images, rapid media distribution, and community engagement had combined to identify a suspect in record time. But here's what I find fascinating about this case. The speed of that arrest was impressive, wasn't it? 8 days from murder to the suspect in custody. In your experience watching true crime cases, how often do you see that kind of rapid resolution? If this case is keeping you as engaged as it kept me while researching, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you think happened next. Because while the arrest was swift, the questions surrounding this case were just beginning. When Jamarcus Jernigan walked into that police station, he wasn't just turning himself in. He was stepping into a legal system that would treat him as a fully grown adult, despite the fact that he was still a teenager. At 17 years old, Jernigan was technically a minor, but Georgia law doesn't make exceptions for violent felonies like murder. The moment he was booked on these charges, his youth became legally irrelevant. This distinction matters more than you might think. Adult charges mean adult consequences. Where a juvenile might face rehabilitation programs and eventual release, an adult conviction for murder in Georgia can mean life in prison. For Jernigan's family, watching their teenage son face adult charges had to be devastating, regardless of what they believed about his guilt or innocence. The charges themselves were substantial: murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Each count carried serious prison time, and together they painted a picture of a violent crime that prosecutors would argue deserved the harshest possible punishment. But here's where this case takes a turn that even experienced investigators found puzzling. The arrest warrant for Jamarcus Jernigan contained all the standard legal language, all the procedural requirements, and all the specific charges. What it didn't contain was arguably the most important element of any criminal case: a motive. Think about that for a moment. In virtually every murder case, investigators and prosecutors worked tirelessly to establish why the crime occurred. Was it robbery, revenge, a crime of passion, a drug deal gone wrong? The why behind a murder often determines everything from the charges filed to the sentence imposed. It helps juries understand how a human being could take another person's life. In this case, there was nothing. No explanation, no reason, no motive listed anywhere in the official documents. This absence wasn't an oversight or a bureaucratic mistake. Investigators had thoroughly examined the relationship between Koko and her alleged killer, and what they found was nothing. No previous contact, no shared history, no obvious reason for conflict. The evidence suggested that these two people were complete strangers before that night at the apartment complex. The lack of motive created a disturbing void at the heart of this case. It suggested that Koko's murder might have been completely random, that she died for no reason that anyone could understand or explain. For her loved ones, this absence of explanation had to be particularly torturous. At least when there's a motive, families can try to make sense of their loss, even if they can't accept it. While prosecutors were preparing their case based on video evidence and witness testimony, another drama was playing out in public. Jernigan's mother stepped forward with a fierce defense of her son that would complicate the narrative surrounding his arrest. She didn't just quietly support him behind the scenes. Instead, she made public statements asserting his complete innocence. According to his mother, Jernigan had turned himself in specifically to clear his name. She insisted that he didn't commit the murder and didn't even own a gun. In her version of events, her son was an innocent teenager who had been wrongly identified and was cooperating with police to resolve the misunderstanding. This maternal defense created a powerful counter-narrative to the prosecution's case. Here was a mother looking directly into news cameras and declaring her absolute belief in her child's innocence. Her conviction was unwavering, her statements clear and direct. She wasn't making excuses or offering mitigating circumstances. She was denying that he had committed any crime at all. The family's position created an interesting legal dynamic. While Jernigan's attorney would likely focus on challenging the evidence and identification, his mother was making the case in the court of public opinion. Her statements suggested that the defense would be complete denial rather than any kind of justification or mitigation strategy. From the warrant, we know that Jernigan admitted to being in the Chevron convenience store that night, the same store where video captured the suspect in that distinctive white hoodie. But he denied any involvement in the shooting itself. This partial admission created a complex legal puzzle. He was placing himself in the area, wearing the same clothing as the shooter, but maintaining his innocence regarding the actual crime. This type of defense presents unique challenges. If Jernigan wasn't the shooter, then who was? And why was someone else wearing identical clothing in the same area at the same time? The specificity of the white hoodie with its particular emblem made claims of mistaken identity difficult to sustain. The emotional stakes were enormous for everyone involved. Koko's family and friends were mourning the loss of someone they loved while seeking justice for her murder. Jernigan's family was fighting to save their teenage son from a life sentence while maintaining his complete innocence. These competing tragedies, one family destroyed by loss, another potentially destroyed by prosecution, added human complexity to what might otherwise be a straightforward criminal case. The age factor couldn't be ignored, even if the law treated Jernigan as an adult. His mother's public statements carried additional weight because she was defending not just a suspected criminal, but her teenage child. The image of a 17-year-old facing life in prison for a crime his family insists he didn't commit added emotional complexity that pure legal proceedings couldn't capture. What emerged was a case where the physical evidence seemed strong, but the human elements were complicated. Video showed someone in distinctive clothing committing murder. That same clothing was worn by Jernigan at a nearby location. But his family's absolute certainty of his innocence, combined with the complete absence of any understandable motive, created questions that the legal system would have to address. The missing motive remained the most unsettling aspect of the entire case. Even if Jernigan was guilty, why had this happened? What could have triggered such extreme violence over what began as a simple request for help with phone charging? The news of Koko's death hit Atlanta's LGBTQ+ community like a devastating blow. This wasn't just the loss of one person. This was the silencing of a voice that had been speaking for countless others who rarely get heard. The community had watched Koko rise to prominence through Kokomo City, had celebrated her success, and had seen her as proof that things could get better for Black transgender women. Now, she was gone. The immediate response was an outpouring of grief and solidarity. On April 22, 2023, just 4 days after the murder, community members gathered at the exact spot where Koko had been killed. They held a candlelight vigil, transforming the sidewalk near Holmes Shopping Plaza into a temporary memorial. Candles flickered in the Atlanta evening as people shared memories, tears, and determination to honor her legacy. The vigil wasn't just about mourning, it was about refusing to let Koko become just another statistic. The people who gathered that night understood that her death represented something much larger than a single act of violence. They were there to bear witness, to say her name, and to demand that her life mattered. Director D. Smith, who had worked closely with Koko on Kokomo City, spoke about the overwhelming difficulty of processing her loss. For Smith and others who had collaborated with her, Koko's death felt like a personal betrayal of everything they had tried to accomplish with the documentary. They had created a film to humanize Black transgender women, to show their joy and resilience, only to lose one of their stars to the very violence they had sought to highlight. The timing made everything more painful. Kokomo City had been gaining recognition and praise since its Sundance premiere. It represented hope that mainstream media was finally ready to tell authentic stories about transgender women. Koko's murder transformed that hope into something more complex, a reminder that visibility can be both empowering and dangerous. Koko's death also forced a broader conversation about the epidemic of violence facing Black transgender women in America. Atlanta police revealed they were investigating 3 separate violent crimes involving transgender women around the same time period. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that advocacy groups had been documenting and fighting against for years. The statistics are stark and heartbreaking. Black transgender women face disproportionate rates of violence compared to almost any other demographic group. They are targeted for being Black, for being women, and for being transgender. The intersection of these identities creates a perfect storm of vulnerability that too often ends in tragedy. Organizations like GLAAD used Koko's death as an opportunity to push for better media coverage of transgender victims. They emphasized the importance of using correct names and pronouns, of focusing on the person's life rather than just their death, and of providing context about the broader violence facing the transgender community. But for all the community organizing, all the vigils, and all the advocacy work, one crucial element remained frustratingly absent: closure through the legal system. Here's where the story takes an incomplete turn that leaves us with more questions than answers. Despite the arrest of Jamarcus Jernigan, despite the charges filed against him, and despite the seemingly strong evidence, there's a significant gap in what we know about the legal outcome of this case. The available records don't provide information about whether Jernigan went to trial, whether he was convicted, or what sentence he might have received. This absence of resolution means that for Koko's family, friends, and community, the question of justice remains open. Did the legal system deliver accountability for her death? Was the teenager who allegedly killed her held responsible? We simply don't know. This unresolved status reflects a broader reality about the criminal justice system. Cases that capture public attention during the arrest phase often fade from view during the lengthy legal process that follows. Appeals, plea negotiations, and trial delays can stretch resolution out for years, and media coverage typically moves on to other stories. For those who loved Koko, this lack of clarity about legal outcomes has to be particularly frustrating. They organized, they mourned publicly, they demanded justice, but they may still be waiting to see if the system delivered. The impact of Koko's death continues to resonate. Kokomo City has been dedicated to her memory, ensuring that her voice and story remain part of the cultural conversation. She was honored during the In Memoriam segment of the 2023 BET Awards, bringing her story to an even wider audience. Her own words continue to inspire. "We can do anything, we can be whatever we want to be." Those words take on additional power now, serving as both a memorial to her optimism and a challenge to those who remain to continue the work she started. Koko's story doesn't end with her death. Her legacy continues through conversations like the one we're having right now. If her story has moved you, please share this video to help spread awareness about the ongoing violence facing the transgender community. Subscribe to this channel because we'll continue covering cases that matter, stories that need to be told with the respect and attention they deserve. What case would you like to see covered next? Let me know in the comments below.